My dear friends, happy Friday night. Welcome back to Tales of Praxis. My name is Aaron Suduko. I'm your host, the founder of withtheterriblefate.com, your online source for all the most rigorous and passionate literary studies of your favorite video games. And in fact, after warning people that I might be late, we managed to start on time. I never know with the technical difficulties we've been working through over the last few days, but I'm hopeful that we are over the hump on that stuff. Grail is also here on time. You here for the night, my friend? It's a tall order to redeem yourself after last time, but we're gonna give you one chance. I'm kidding, obviously. That's the next thing I was gonna say. I'm so glad you can tell right away, Grail. It's actually a funny story. I don't really know if the story is that funny. Let me see if I can adjust my webcam a bit. That's a little bit better. It's funny because, as you know, Grail, and as people who have been listening to the stream probably know, I've been encountering some weird audio issues for quite a while, and so I was worried. I thought initially it had to do with the the cord hub that I was using attached to my Mac, and then I thought maybe it was just the cord that I was using to connect the mic to it. And then I was even worried maybe I damaged the mic somehow. Actually, hilariously, none of the above. It turned out the mic was working perfectly fine in everything except for OBS. And OBS just has wonderful, impossible to navigate or understand settings that were somehow not even duplicating the audio, but somehow creating feedback by registering the input from the mic more than once. So I had to spend more time than I care to admit, probably like 45 minutes at least, troubleshooting specifically OBS. But I'm fairly confident I figured out the issue now, and hopefully it should sound once again like I'm talking out of a mic where you can hopefully tell I've tried to put some thought and care into the setup as opposed to a tin can on a stream that otherwise looks quasi-professional. So all is well that ends well, but oh my goodness, Aaron's adventures in streaming. There's never a dull moment, I guess. Oh, Grail, you're here until you're not. I love that. Same here. So there you go. We're in good company. Friends, if you're a newcomer to the stream, want to know what we're all about, like I said, With a Terrible Fate and correspondingly our streaming is a little different than what you might expect from other streams. It's all about treating video games as some of the most innovative and special works of literature out there. So it's a little bit of a live book club vibe. I've also been calling it a real life JRPG party, going through these games together and talking about them as we go. I kicked it off back in March, which is now further away than I would care to admit because time flies, with Tales of Symphonia Remastered. We did a stream of that, went into Dawn of the New World, and then we wanted to do a similarly interesting kind of duology in the Tales series. So we did Zestiria into Alicia's story, now into Tales of Berseria. So the series is all about just digging into and analyzing and appreciating the storytelling of Namco's Tales JRPGs. By playing them and thinking about them in quick succession and seeing how they connect with each other, create a language, and have influenced video game storytelling beyond that. Grail, appreciate the good vibes around OBS. I tell you, I like to think of myself as a fairly tech-savvy individual, but oh my goodness, the learning curve that I've had to go through for things like streaming makes me feel like maybe I'm actually a Luddite at heart, and just a Luddite who happens to be really into video games, not as a fact that they're innovative technology, but more so just because of the particular standing they give their players in relation to the story. So thank you. That makes me feel a little bit better. A couple of quick highlights, and I don't want to spend too long before this because we finally made it to the capital. I think it's great to just dive into Loegres, but to set the stage for some of the other things that are in the works on this fine Friday evening, a couple of shout outs pertinent to Tales of Praxis. First, last night, I am delighted to say I spent a decent amount of time scaffolding the outline and skeleton of the lecture that my friend and colleague Dan Hughes and I are going to be giving in almost exactly 1 month at PAX West in Seattle. Already getting really excited about it. I think it's going to be really productive and fun. And one thing that I will announce on the stream first, I already mentioned this idea a while ago, but I was playing with it. I wasn't sure whether to commit to it, but I mentioned it to Dan, and Dan was gung-ho about it and said, yeah, we absolutely have to do that. So this is going to be part of the presentation. The thrust of it and the way to get people in the door is a mock debate between me and Dan about whether Pokemon qualifies as a JRPG. And then kind of the payoff for that is going to be actually doing a bit of a reading and analysis of different kinds of more obvious JRPGs to see how genre can be a useful tool for comparing them, but also just a jumping off point rather than an end-all be-all for talking about the value or meaning of the game. And so, in order to make our point around that, we're actually going to be conducting a comparative analysis between Final Fantasy XVI and Tales of Arise, because obviously Final Fantasy XVI is super recent and topical, and Dan is kind of our resident Final Fantasy expert on With a Terrible Fate. Obviously, for better or worse, I am the resident Tales expert, and I was struck by how superficially similar the two games seem to be in terms of tackling a lot of similar themes and narrative points. But I think it's a great case study for picking apart exactly what we're talking about, exactly because when you think about Final Fantasy XVI and Tales of Arise situated in their respective series, they end up saying very different things and having very different stories to tell. So that means I'm going to be doing I don't want to say a speed through, but an efficient playthrough of Tales of Arise between now and PAX, as if I didn't have enough other research on my plate. But it's going to be fun research, and I also played Tales of Arise pretty recently since it only came out 2 years ago. So it'll be more of a refresher than anything, but I'm excited to be digging into that. We're going to make a point to record the talk also, since it's not going to be streamed this time. So hopefully you get a chance to check that out, and hopefully you enjoy it as well. Grail, you're saying uh-oh? I hope that's an excited uh-oh as opposed to an uh-oh of concern. I think it is interesting, and I think it's interesting as a really fruitful case study, Grail, because one of the overall points that we want to make, or at least get people to start thinking about in this talk, is how different games and game series that seem to be similar or aligned by genre can say very different things based on the context of their series and the storytelling language they've put together, like we've been talking about with respect to the Tales series for a long time. And so that's why I think it's going to be a lot of fun, because playing through 16, initially I found myself thinking time and again, oh man, this feels a lot like Tales of Arise. I almost feel like they kind of just lifted the plot out of that and are putting it in a Final Fantasy game. But I think like that's an interesting point of entry and pretty superficial take. I think once you then supplement that with the very different context from the sorts of stories that Final Fantasy is interested in telling versus the Tales series, even though it's easy to lump them together in our heads as, you know, popular JRPG series that are oftentimes similarly structured and maybe even have similar plot points, they actually end up saying pretty interestingly different things. So I think it'll be fun. Don't leave anything to my imagination, dude, because my imagination is a dangerously powerful tool. I will over-imagine anything you could have meant by that. Pink Moon Echo, welcome. Pleasure to have you. Obviously, we're just vamping before we dive in here. I was talking a little bit about the lecture that I am now in the active planning stages of creating that Dan and I are going to be giving at PAX West in about a month. The other thing that I will say, and I know I've been teasing this for a while, but truly now that I have put Berseria down, I am pivoting to writing and publishing more analyses, which I'm really excited about. I switched gears and started diving into that last night and immediately got reinvigorated for that aspect of the Tales of Praxis series. So hopefully you're going to enjoy that too. I'm starting out with what was initially a character study of Regal based on my experiences with him kind of unexpectedly from my stream of Tales of Symphonia, Dawn of the New World. In typical me fashion, the article is kind of morphing into something that is a little more about kind of the overall point, I think, of Tales of Symphonia and also even Dawn of the New World after that than it is about Regal per se. but in a way that I'm pretty interested in, and I think it's going to be a cool thing to look at. So hopefully you all will have a chance to check it out once I publish. Hopefully maybe next week, and we can talk about it on the stream. To make a very long story very short and kind of just tease you guys about the sorts of things I'm thinking about. The more I've taken a step back and thought about Tales of Symphonia in sort of its context of the broader Tales series, the more I think it's saying really interesting things about sort of the relationship between the actions that we take in a world and how the impact of those actions is not always obvious or even transparent to us. So we can have a bunch of unintended consequences whenever we try to do anything. But then also the empowering agency and transparency of the ways in which we can interpret actions, such as to say that even though we might not have authority to decide exactly what difference our actions are going to make in the world, we always have the license and the agency to think about the meaning of those actions in different ways. And the more we're able to rethink the content of those actions and share new ways of thinking about them with others, the more we can actually create a new world figuratively in the same way that Lloyd and the gang is able to literally accomplish at the end of Tales of Symphonia. So believe it or not, Regal and my unexpected experience with him ended up being my way into thinking about all of that stuff. But I think it's all going to factor into this article, which will be kind of breaking the seal on the renewed written content of companion articles for Tales of Praxis. And then, as you all know, I have plenty of other ideas for plenty of other games in the series in the hopper after that. So hopefully you can look forward to some new publications and stuff for us to chat about even beyond Tales of Berseria as we march forward here. I'm really looking forward to it. I hope you all are too. Grail, good question. I know, talk about bad timing. It's so funny. You basically had to dip as soon as Eizen showed up in the party. You may want to watch the VOD because we spent a lot of time talking about his character in the last stream. The one thing I'll say by way of situating him in our Tales of Praxis study, because I think you'll find this interesting too, is obviously when I first played Tales of Berseria, I recognized Eizen as Edna's brother, and this character we knew in a very different context in Tales of Zestiria. One thing that I didn't connect last time because I didn't have Zestiria fresh in my mind, but which I did right away this time, is there's this whole interesting and not super explicitly explained notion of the Reaper's curse, to which Eizen is bound, where he basically propagates bad luck and people turning into demons and every other unfortunate thing you could imagine wherever he goes, and the people who hook up with him and form a group are kind of just saddled with that bad luck. I remember really not knowing how to wrap my head around that the first time I played Berseria, but now that we're going into it with the very fresh context of Tales of Zestiria at our back, I immediately drew a connection to Dezel and said to myself, oh man, this is just another way of talking about the exact same aspect of Eizen's nature that Dezel suffered with, except Eizen wears it on his sleeve and recognizes it as a part of who he is, whereas Dezel went in the exact opposite direction and totally repressed those memories of all of the chaos and pain that he'd caused, which was part of what ended up setting him up to be undermined by Simone, and for him to ultimately have to make the sacrifice that he did in order to save Rose. So I thought it was a cool, unexpected connection between this game and the last to say, yeah, obviously Eizen has this connection with Edna, but look at how multifaceted his relationship with the series is. It's actually giving us the insight into how a very different kind of character would cope with that question that Simone puts to the group in Tales of Zestiria, namely, what do you do if you're someone who only begets pain and bad luck and suffering in the world, no matter where you go and no matter what you desire for those around you? So I'm really interested in him for that reason. I think that's a really interesting lens through which to view his kind of resoluteness of character. He seems very self-assured in a way that, say, a character like Dezel didn't, especially. So excited to see where his character development goes as we continue on in the story. And notice, this was something I called out last time too, Grail, we really had no explicit connections between Berseria and Zestiria until Eizen showed up, which was a good 7 or 8 hours into the game, which I thought was a really interesting and I would say surprising way of structuring the player's experience of uncovering Berseria as a prequel pretty far into it, even if they had recently played Zestiria before it. So, long answer to a short question, but very interested to see where he goes. A skill issue, interesting. So what do you mean by that, Grail? Yeah, Pink Moon Echo. Thank you for calling that out. One thing that was fun on the last stream, Grail, just to catch you up, which I don't think we had talked about before, but it actually calls back to what you and I talked about back when we were in the Calyx, the EX dungeon of Tales of Zestiria, was I had completely forgotten in terms of the coin that Eizen uses, his kind of Two-Face prop, if you will, if there are any Batman fans among you besides me. The lore of that coin is like deeply rooted in the history of the Tales of Symphonia and Dawn of the New World and Tales of Fantasia universe, where it's a coin that's meant to represent kind of this war between Martel and Daus. And so there's this really interesting and cool skit kind of spinning out that lore and talking about it in relation to what I think Lafiset calls the Age of Myth, which immediately got me thinking, well, wouldn't it be interesting if that connected to the era of the gods that Mikleo and Saray were talking about in the last game, especially in reference to the Calyx? Because remember, one of the things that was fun for us when we were just starting out in that EX dungeon was the idea that they were explicitly calling out the Hexen Isle as these relics from the Age of the Gods. And what if that was an age that somehow reached out to gods like the players and those other people who existed beyond the purview of the single world of Zestiria and Berseria, and therefore kind of created some in-universe justification for this specific fictional world that we're seeing in Zestiria and Berseria functioning as a kind of nexus, where the different nearby, like proximate fictional worlds of the other Tales games have like a lore-based explanation for why they would intersect here. Because obviously all the time in all the different games you get sort of more or less explained cameos of characters from the different worlds, but especially since they took the time to integrate that bit of lore about the coin into the mainline story of Berseria, it really struck me that they were just doubling down on a lot of what we were speculating about in reference to the EX dungeon in Zestiria, which was really cool and fun to think about. So I don't remember whether they dive into that anymore in this game. I hope they do, but I definitely have my antenna up for that as we go forward. Grail, I mean, that's what it's all about, right? First you get a curse, then you recognize you have the curse, and then you figure out some way to turn that into a really cool character trait as opposed to some problem with your character. And Eizen, of course, is a great case study for that. Yeah, they did name drop Grail, exactly that. And not even just Fantasia. It was like a really interesting amalgam of Fantasia's lore and stuff about the goddess Martel coming in from Symphonia. I guess nothing from Dawn of the New World per se, but definitely like with an awareness of and straddling of the various games that take place in that particular universe, which was cool. Also, it was very funny because Grail, I'm going to thank you too for convincing me to go back and take the time to do the bonus Colosseum battles in Tales of Vesperia, because I did do that before I totally wrapped it up and decided to put it down. And it was so funny to go from this stream where we had this unexpected allusion to Daus from Tales of Fantasia to actually having a cameo exhibition match against Daus in the Colosseum of Tales of Vesperia. So sometimes a plan just comes together, and I love that. So I'm going to have a million more thoughts about Vesperia, but for now, I think that's enough by way of preamble. We are in Loegres. All the characters are here for their own reasons. Most immediately, Velvet's revenge quest 3 years in the making against Artorias. But also we know from the last stream, Rokuro is not only here for paying his debt to Velvet, but because someone with as yet unclear connections to the Rangetsu clan is here, we found out. and Eizen is in pursuit of the great pirate Eifried, the man, the myth, the legend, sometimes the little girl. And he found out from Velvet that he is no longer on Titania, where she was imprisoned, but has at least allegedly been brought back to the capital under the yoke of a particular exorcist who is high up in Artorias' organization, the Abbey. So we just docked here at the end of last stream, and without further ado, my friends, my real-life JRPG companions, I'm going to welcome you back to Tales of Praxis, and let's dive in and see this capital for ourselves. You know you've reached a new area in a JRPG when there are a million side quest and side conversation indicators on the map. But I do love having that. It makes me feel like I can much more efficiently fish out all of the interesting side content without risking missing things.
Even their innards are yummy. And 5 sets of legs. That's so many.
That's all true. But what really makes them amazing is their miraculous ability to regenerate. They can detach their own legs when a predator attacks, which lets them get away.
It's called autotomy.
And then, not long after they detach their leg, a new one grows from the stump.
Really? So you're saying we need to catch lots of crabs, then scare them so they detach their own legs?
Brilliant.
That's exactly what
What
I'm
could
saying,
go
bro.
wrong?
We can harvest as much as we like. No one's thought of this before. We're geniuses.
It's free crab meat.
Huh. I never knew that. I thought only lizards could regrow a lost body part, and only their tails.
Lizards. Do you think Dial's tail can grow back?
If it does, we could make a killing by selling dial tails.
Would they be tasty?
No idea.
Ugh, no way.
Grail, that is such a cool connection between Dawn of the New World and Fantasia. Thanks for calling that out. I'd had half a mind to play Tales of Fantasia next, just because I really do want to appreciate what connections and how deep of connections it has to Dawn of the New World and Tales of Symphonia, because I never really played them one after another in tight sequence before in my past. I've played Fantasia before, but not closely following up on Symphonia and Dawn of the New World. So it's definitely on my list. It's sounding like I will have to plow through Tales of Arise first, and between that and my article writing, I probably won't be able to juggle another one, but you never know. As you do know, I can be easily talked into those sorts of things, and I do have really fond memories of Fantasia from the one time that I played it, so it's certainly on the larger list. We'll see when I end up going back to it.
Have you heard? Marcus and his pirates were taken out by the Royal Navy.
So, they even got Marcus's crew now.
Of the 4 pirate kings who terrorized Midgand, only Eifried and his crew remain.
Aren't the seas still swarming with pirates?
Only small fry that rob small civilian ships on the sly. But the only pirates left that can pick a fight with the Royal Navy and win are Eifried and his crew.
In other words, the only ship left that's truly free is the Von Eltia.
For a merchant, you really seem to like these pirates.
He may be crooked, but money's not all he's after. If profit was his only desire, he could have made more by selling us out.
But that'd be too boring, don't you think?
Oh, you'd be into an Arise stream, Pink Moon Echo?
Breaking the rules.
Thanks for letting me know.
Funny guy.
And that's why Eifried goes through him whenever we need to dock here.
Well, I can't say I've ever met a human like him.
Yeah, we obviously have many hours to go in Tales of Berseria, but it sounds like now that I've committed to this idea for the PAX lecture, I'm going to be playing Tales of Arise either way. And so if y'all are interested, I could definitely, without putting down Tales of Berseria, kind of supplement our streaming schedule, I guess, with Tales of Arise. Especially since I'm going to need to be playing through it pretty efficiently. I could even just start some streams of it on the days that we're not doing Berseria, if that's not too confusing for y'all. God knows I've trained myself enough at this point to manage the two in my head with some struggle and minor seizures along the way. But yeah, let me know. I mean, we're going to be doing this Monday, Wednesday, Friday, so we could easily do Tales of Arise like Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday or something. If it's interesting to people. Like I said, I'll be doing it either way. That sounds like a challenge, Grail. Also, bear in mind, for most of Tales of Praxis so far, I've been more or less playing 2 of the Tales games at once, one on stream and one off stream. Like, I was doing Destiny back when I was doing Zestiria, and then in the later part of Zestiria and the DLC, I was doing Vesperia. So, it's I definitely have an upper threshold, but I seem to be decent at managing 2 of them at once at least. Especially when they're ones I've played before, such as
Wind's
Arise.
kicking and the tide's flowing, and we're stuck here.
Then why not just set sail?
Not
All right,
going
yeah,
to
appreciate the
Abbey
perspective,
hasn't
Pink
given us
Moon Echo.
permission
Thank
yet.
you.
And we would
I
need their
will.
permission
I'll think
while
on it and
you
definitely
keep
make an
them
announcement
just
if I decide to
watch
do
on
that.
harbors and
Probably in short
seaports.
order, so
It's
keep
like
your
they've
eyes
erected
peeled on our
walls
social
and gates
media.
in the sea.
Aha! Midgand is spread across a number of islands. The sea is the only way to get from one place to another. If they can control the ships, they can control the flow of people, goods, and even information.
Exactly. They even created that fortress, Vortigern, to help them do just that.
It's restrictive, but it's also necessary. Demons are out at sea too, and exorcists are the only ones who can stand against them.
Even still, it rubs me the wrong way. A sea dog obeys nothing but the winds and the waves.
This is interesting too to keep track of as we continue to go through Berseria in terms of the overt focus that the world and the story have on the sea and sort of open sea navigation and sailing for 2 reasons. First, in general, within the Tales games and JRPGs, I feel like the sea and ship navigation is basically this weird intermediary point between when your group just starts out and is walking on foot, and then the later game where the ship is usually pretty quickly replaced by an airship or some other form of air travel. So sea travel as such typically doesn't play a very large role, although it almost always comes up in one form or another in kind of the late, early to mid game of the JRPG, I would say. But then also, even more specifically to Berseria, remember, we just played Zestiria, which putatively takes place in the same world. And there was basically no oceanic travel in that. It was just this group of cities, mostly divvied up between these 2 different nations, all on contiguous land masses. So it's interesting to have this very different perspective on the very same world. One that is, we'll recall, justified by the fact that, as McLeo and Saray were talking about near the end of our Zestiria playthrough, there were many other lands beyond the purview of what their personal journey led them on in Tales of Zestiria.
Eizen told us to come see you. What's all this about a scouting ship?
We're going to explore the outer seas. Oh, let me explain. Beyond the reaches of our kingdom lie vast, open oceans we call the outer seas.
And you're going to explore them? What for?
To make a map of the whole world, of course.
A map of the whole world.
That's right. Eifried's pirates have many ambitions, one of which is the creation of a complete map describing the whole world. In fact, the Von Eltius already sailed all the way to the far continent for that very reason.
That's amazing.
You guys sure dream big.
I still don't get it.
Yeah, me neither. A map of a bunch of places nobody cares about? Big deal.
Well, regardless, if we're going to find anything in the vast waters, we'll need a lot of luck. We'd like to borrow some of yours.
And just how do you plan on doing that?
I want you to use your gut instincts to tell us where to look. In exchange, the Von Eltia will be at your service, and you can keep anything we find in our explorations. You'll be able to assign us new orders from any location by using a kind of messenger bird called a sylph jay.
Who knows? We might even come across some good treasure, or maybe some rare food, or brand new recipes.
That's a lot of
I
treasure
do
you could
remember
find.
not
Doesn't sound
loving
bad to
this
me.
system
Won't
the first
take
time I
much of our
played the game,
time, and
Grail.
besides, it can be interesting.
You're right. Okay, as long as I'm not responsible
Idle
for
games
how
are not
things turn
quite
out,
my bag.
I guess I can help.
All right, then I'll tell you what you need to know.
Although I'll tell you, they're not my bag, but I think part of why they're not my bag is that they're so radically addictive to me, though I feel as though I typically get not that much out of it for all the time I put into it. Like, I loved Ni no Kuni, and I also really liked Ni no Kuni 2, but oh my god, in Ni no Kuni 2, the amount of time I invested in the idle passive gaming of building the kingdom, because that's such a huge part of the game. It's not that I didn't love that. Again, it's just like, relative to all of the other possible kinds of content you could include in a JRPG, it just left me feeling like, in terms of time in versus like insights and like quality thematic meaning out, I was not experiencing a great ratio. That's oftentimes how I feel with stuff like that. Also, yes, just catching up on your message about the dialogue, I feel like it's rebalanced in terms of where you get it. Like, at least so far, much less of it seems to happen when you're out wandering the world, and they seem to have added a lot more of just much more involved conversations within town with seemingly random NPCs, which definitely gives a different contour to the sorts of conversations you're having, I think. Teach me how to idle. Teach me how to idle. So many choices. You know what it is? It's just the Merc missions from Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Except, I suppose, with the difference that you don't have to actually select people from your party to go on the voyages. It's just the ship.
Scout ship setting sail.
Yeah, for sure.
Take a look at this.
I would agree with that. It's also an interesting choice for the Tales series to be making, because this whole setup, to me, has pretty deep echoes of the, I forget the name they used in Dawn of the New World, but like the one-off missions you could go on in the like little mini dungeons from the various cat guild members in Dawn of the New World. And I feel like this is kind of in that same spirit of going on these side adventures, but it's even less directly involved than that, where at least in those side missions in Dawn of the New World, yeah, there wasn't a lot of narrative content, but it was still a bit of a grind and an adventure to take Emil and Marta and some monsters on, whereas here it's totally hands-off and you're just allocating an anonymous ship to go off on this journey and then come back after a fixed amount of time. Yeah, I've had that comment of yours in my head since the first time you said it, Grail, about how quick the turnaround was on this after Zestiria. I'm trying not to let that make me too cynical about the game, but you definitely see a lot of the design choices with a different set of eyes when you keep that in mind, I think. But again, I think I said this last time, Majora's Mask, one of the greatest pieces of modern art, I would say, which was only possible because of the quick turnaround and the weird way in which Nintendo decided to reuse assets. So sometimes necessity is the mother of invention, as they say. Yeah, Pink Moon Echo, it's a good question. And again, I'm trying not to be colored too much by our friend Grail, who I know is a bit more wishy-washy on it. But I do feel like, here's the thing. I wouldn't say I have a problem with Berseria's music so far. I would say quality Tales music is such a high bar, because when the series knocks it out of the park, it's just, in my opinion, some of the best video game music you'll ever find anywhere. Like, there are so many tracks from like Tales of the Abyss and Tales of Symphonia, Even some of the like lo-fi 8-bit stuff in Tales of Destiny that live rent-free in my head all the time. And I think against that perhaps unreasonably high standard, Berseria so far feels a little more middle of the road. Even relative to Zestiria, actually. We talked a lot about how cool many of the musical tracks were in that. So I'm sure there will be some memorable and cool tracks, but even just more of like the idle or repetitive navigation music, like the kind you get in dungeons or what we're hearing right now as we're hanging out in town, I feel like it's not quite the same quality as like, the music you would get in Isalia at the start of Tales of Symphonia. Like I can hear that so vividly, and it's such a memorable track to me in the way that this is just kind of in contrast, a little bit of background noise. Pink Moon Echo, best soundtrack? That is such a tough question. I think that'll be something I will be excited to answer once I've played through all of the games for Tales of Praxis, because they're definitely not all equally fresh in my head. I would say, I think probably in large part because of my childhood experience with the game, Tales of Symphonia, every aspect of that game will always have a special place in my heart, and there are many tracks from that game that just resonate with me to this day as incredibly moving and emotional and inspiring. Tracks like the one that plays whenever you fight a summon spirit, the track which I think is called Final Battle Decision, which is the track that plays like in Vinheim and the final run up to Mythos. That track is amazing. But I also remember much more recently being blown away by the music of Tales of Arise. And I don't think I could point to any particular song in it as much as I could something like Symphonia, but I remember really, really being impressed by the musical landscape that they created to undergird the cadence of their story. Yeah, both versions. Completely agree with that, Grail. I'm going to play them all, my friend. I literally the other day, I unpacked a replacement PS3 because my old one, Yellow Light of Death, on me a while ago. So I've got a new one. I've got Graces, which I've played before. And for a while, I would have said was my favorite Tales game. So I'm really excited to go back to that. I have never played the Tales of Zestiria duology, even though I've picked up and tried to get through Tales of Zestiria more than once in my past. So we're going to do them all. One thing that I'll also flag, and then I'll try to make a little bit more progress because I know we're just chatting more than gaming right now, which is okay. That's part of the stream. But since we're already starting to plug through Berseria, you all should start thinking about which game you'd be interested in playing for the next stream of Tales of Praxis, because I'm going to be playing through them all. I don't know if I'm going to be streaming them all, but definitely if there's one that we think will be a lot of fun to stream together after Tales of Berseria, I am more than happy to earmark that for the stream and plan to dive into it next after Berseria. Yeah, but what about you two, Grail and Pink Moon Neko? What are your favorite Tales soundtracks, if you had to pick one, gun to your head? Such an impossible question, also. It's like saying, what's your favorite, like, I don't know, Michelangelo painting or something like that?
So now we just wait for news.
That's kind of how I feel, Grail. Like, as long as you're listening to a Tales soundtrack, you've made the right decision.
Desert islands?
New shipping lanes, perhaps.
Some fish would be enough for me, especially if they sell well.
My thoughts exactly. Tuna or yellowtail or sturgeon.
All right. We have our ship a-sailing. If I remember right, we can manage it really easily from the menu. Excellent. Oh, Grail, can you help me actually? Because I'm too lazy to look at the tutorials, and I was having a stroke trying to figure out this last time. How do you like change the arrangement of your characters in the party if you want to default to a character other than Velvet in battle. Because for the life of me, I couldn't figure out how to do that last time. I know how to change them once you're in battle. We figured that out. But like when I try to do it on this menu... Oh, of course, I asked that and now it's obvious. So I must have been totally missing the button last time. That's bizarre. Either that or they just unlocked it. Well, I apologize, but asked and answered. Thank you so much for your help, Grail. I couldn't have done that without you. It's a Friday stream. We're having fun. But we should forge ahead since we're finally at the place Velvet has been trying to get to for 3 years. All right, we're going south. It's funny because I came up as a kid playing mostly Nintendo and then Xbox, and I came to Sony late in my life. So for the longest time, it was like, I don't want to say a form of dyslexia, but I had the hardest time getting my thumbs to remember, like, which of the 4 symbols, square, circle, triangle, cross, were on, like, which buttons of the controller. Now I think finally, since I mostly play Sony systems these days, it's become a bit of second nature, but honestly, there are more times than I'd care to admit in my gaming past where I really was like, oh, where's the square button? I kind of need that right now.
I've heard there's a prison island somewhere where they keep the worst of the worst, but it's a hard tale to swallow.
It's true.
And
I'm glad, Grail. I think casual Fridays are an important part of the otherwise very academic and analytical streaming atmosphere here on With a Terrible Fate, so I'm glad you appreciate that too. Yeah, see, I would probably have trouble going back to Xbox now since it's been years since I've played it, but I was on the 360 before I was on any PlayStation, so it was second nature to me for a while.
I found these for you.
Oh my god.
Looks like the
My
microphone
PlayStation
used
always
right
wants
now.
to be involved.
Try again later.
I have to add to my checklist. Mute the microphone before we start these. Yeah, Pink Moon Echo, I'm so with you. The openings to these games are always some of my favorite parts. It's annoying for the stream because I found out after Tales of Symphonia that for whatever like esoteric copyright reasons, like those animated music videos at the start of the games are also some of the only things that have like stringent, weird copyright restrictions around them, which is why I don't play them as part of the stream when we dig into these games, because YouTube like flagged an issue with my doing that in Symphonia. But yeah, I mean, talk about a great way of setting the tone and encapsulating the entire story of these games in such a succinct and musically motivated package. I lose my mind for those every time.
Fact.
People say that no one has ever escaped from there alive.
That one's a lie. After all, we're here.
Wait, you don't mean...
Keep your mouth shut. Otherwise, you'll fare worse than anyone on that island.
Eisen, you weren't even there, bro.
Sir, I didn't hear a thing.
Eisen knows how to stand up for his crew, I guess. Grail, you gotta stop talking about the ones that haven't been localized, dude. I'm just gonna lose my mind trying to figure out the best ways to access them. I'm still holding out hope that, especially as the series has gotten more popularity, they will eventually give us official localizations of Rebirth and Tales of Destiny 2 and Innocence and all those other great things that have not made it over here. But maybe that's a pipe dream more than anything. Yeah, Eisen is pretty awesome. I'm loving him so far. Especially after spending so much time with Edna recently. I think the writing makes it very believable that they would be siblings. Which is just one of many testaments to how amazing this series is. Yeah, Pink Moon Echo, my feeling with the Switch is always I feel like it's just this close to working perfectly for me. Like, it'll be great, and then one of my controllers will get the infamous drift problem, or I finally, a couple months ago, upgraded to the OLED version for Tears of the Kingdom. I got the special edition console version of that, and the dock just doesn't reliably work. Like, every several minutes, my TV just won't be able to take an input from it, and so the screen will flicker. So it's like, I love and admire Nintendo's ambition, and I'm excited to see whatever they do with their new console that is now, feeding the rumor mill for 2024. Because it is so cool to be able to play something on the TV and then pick it up and take it with you anywhere. That really speaks to my style of gaming. But I think they still have a few smaller nuances and kinks to iron out now that they're kind of zeroing in on what they want to do with it.
Demon, its danger level has been classified as Code Red.
Understood. I'll notify the Abbey we have a Code Red demon in our midst. Send out an emergency alert to the neighboring areas.
Right.
With wild demons this close to the capital, the Abbey must have had its hands full.
Eizen, what did he mean by a Code Red demon?
It's like a most wanted list for demons. From the latest I've heard, there's around 10 such demons across the
Big
territories.
game.
Oh, they sound pretty tough.
Gigantos monsters, but with different names.
Suffice it to say, you wouldn't want to face one unprepared.
Then we'd best be prepared.
Let's get going. While we're wasting time here, the Abbey is digging in.
So these are different than the dire encounters like we had last time, right? I think if I'm understanding this right, Berseria has just added a whole new level of field boss. So we have two types as opposed to the one that we got in Zestiria or Vesperia or a lot of the other games. That's interesting. Well, I feel like there is something classically JRPG about hunting big game along your adventures. And I guess in a world where there's, random malicious demon blight turning everyone into demons with no explanation, it kind of makes sense that there would be those random mega demons wandering about.
You said you heard about Eifried on the prison island, right?
I heard an exorcist legate named Melchior took him away. I don't know anything beyond that.
Neither do I. What about you, Magilou?
Word is he was taken away about a year ago. Caused quite a stir, if I remember right. Everything about him was kept a tight secret. No one even knew what cell he was in.
Eifried is an ordinary human, right?
Yeah. He doesn't have the abilities of an exorcist, and he isn't a demon either.
Weird. I mean, if they were just trying to bust up his gang, why capture him but leave the crew free?
If not his gang, what business does the Abbey have with him then?
We've cast our nets wide and can't come up with any explanation. We'll free him, though. His place is on the sea with us.
And you're convinced he's still alive?
They wouldn't have any problems killing a pirate who caused them trouble.
If the Abbey took him alive and for questioning, it means he has something they really want.
But he isn't the type to change his ways or bend his knee on anyone's orders.
He holds his own tiller.
Precisely.
So I did a few minutes of nomenclature research just because I was interested in some of the terms from Berseria and how they were using them. One, which is why I bring this up, is legate, because obviously I could kind of get from context clues what they were talking about when they said someone like Melchior was a legate, and that rank made him high up in the Abbey, but I was curious because I hadn't really heard that word in other contexts. And it is defined as a member of the clergy, especially a cardinal representing the Pope, or a general or governor of an ancient Roman province, or their deputy. So immediately calling to mind this image of something like the Holy Roman Empire, right, where there's this intersection of religious authority and governance of state, which also was a big theme on our last stream. Grail, I think you had dipped at that point, but Pink Moon Neko and I spent a lot of time talking about the way in which the Abbey has kind of co-opted the language and concept of reason as basically an excuse for their particular structure that they're imposing on the world and the authoritarianism that they're bringing to the fore in terms of how they're governing and controlling everyone. And so that terminology, unsurprisingly, is a really nice fit for that. The other one that was interesting to me was, since obviously to us, having played Tales of Zestiria, there's this connection between what they're referring to as Malachim in Tales of Berseria and Seraphim from Tales of Zestiria. I wanted to look up those because I knew Seraph was a term for like a certain kind of angel. Malach was one that was less familiar to me. Turns out they're both terms for an angel, but a seraph is a much more like rigidly defined hierarchical term for like a specific tier of angel within like the Christian deep lore of like different species of angel, because there's like a very robust and tiered system of like the different sorts of angels and the relationships in which they stand to one another and their like obligations and duties and origin in Christian theology and mythology and mythopoeia, and you can basically go as deep as you want to. And seraphim are kind of like the highest order of angel in that sense. Whereas Malach, I didn't do as much research into that, but it looked, as best as I could tell, it was a term that came from like Arabic tradition, and maybe even like Islam as opposed to Christianity. So something that was more kind of like in the deeper past and like earlier and more I guess foundational religions. I guess that's one way of defining the relationship between Islam and Christianity. Like Islam predated Christianity, but I'm punching a bunch above my weight class on that. I'll have to ask some of my religious study friends for more context. But anyway, all that to say, interesting that since this may or may not be, we're not sure yet, kind of like a look into the world before the system of like the Shepherd and the Lord of Calamity and all of that more like rigid structure guiding the world history and the evolution of humanity was established. It'd be interesting too that they have sort of a more foundational and prototypical term for these creatures who would later be identified as seraphim once you have that sort of more robustly defined and more robustly Christian inspired framework for understanding the world, like we talked about in Zestiria. So I thought that was interesting. Yeah, I'll have to look more into Malachim Grail. There was like less obviously written about it than about the term of seraphim. So I'm not sure whether a Malach is also a type of angel in the Christian like compendium of angel types. But like I said, I want to dig into that some more. Oh, there's another skip. All right, straightforward enough. Now we're getting access to perilous encounters. Fantastic. It took us a minute.
Why did you come back to us?
I could tell you all missed me something awful.
We didn't. At all.
And what about your search for this traitor?
He slipped away yet again. I've no clue where he ran off to.
You're a witch. Can't you use a spell or something?
My spellcraft works kind of like a three-legged race. It simply requires my backstabbing, slippery accomplice.
Like a con artist needs an accomplice.
I am not a con artist.
She was a
I'm
con
not going
artist.
to help you find your traitor, you know.
How cold! Such an icy stare could freeze fire!
And you don't have anyone else?
Well, no.
Do you have a home to return to?
Nope.
Do you know a trade other than magic?
Nope.
What is it, Laphicet?
Magilou's story made my chest feel funny. And my nose is runny.
The witch has no friends, no home, and no purpose. I think what you're feeling is pity.
Pity?
It's when you feel sorrow for someone else.
I pity Magilou.
Oh, come on! Very well. Onward to Loegres.
Wait.
That
you're
reminded me a lot of the exchange in Tales of Symphonia. Presea Not all questions require an answer. In this case, it is fine to ignore Zelos. Just teaching little Laphicet the basics of human interactions. Well adjusted amongst their strange bedfellows, at least. I don't know if I would call them adjusted with regard to the broader society. What do you mean by the black shadowy ground, Grail? You talking about just like shadows like this with the tree here? What do you mean? I hadn't really noticed that as characteristic of this or Zestiria. Axebeak! It's not a Tales game until you fight some Axebeaks. Excellent. I think the last time we played as him, we didn't have the ability to use this yet. Oh, so you need to down the enemy first.
Not good. Not good.
Why can't I down these axe beats? There we go. Awesome.
Let's go. But I'm getting close. I want this. Form zero. Disruption. Let's go. Wide open.
Unarmed? Hardly. These are deadly weapons.
Huh. What'll it take to make you go all out?
Oh, yes. That kind of shadowy floor. That I do, of course, remember from Zestiria. There's such a high concentration of malevolence in such a small area that the ground can't help but to become darkened as a result.
Come on, really?
I've been noticing it more in Berseria so far, Grail. I remember we actually talked about, I feel like when we were doing Zestiria, how kind of varied and organic a lot of the post-battle conversations felt, especially in comparison with some of the earlier games in the series. My guess is we're just in this weird uncanny valley in Berseria where there aren't that many battle party members yet, and Laphicet still isn't talking at all yet, and so I think the conversations are just sort of artificially limited, so we're only getting like 2 or 3 different conversations. So I'm hoping that'll change as we get a little further into the game here.
Come on, really?
All right. Yeah, you guys really got in my head about the music, because now as we're wandering around this field, I'm thinking about the music for navigating the field, and it just, I don't know if it registers with you all this way, but it feels kind of weirdly upbeat to me, where given what we know about the party and their objectives and their journey through the world so far, I would expect the music to be a little edgier or just sort of brimming with like anticipation or kind of malice or something. But it's just so freely adventurous and kind of boisterous. I almost feel like it would be more at home in Tales of Zestiria than here in Berseria.
They're so huge.
That's Loegres, the capital of the Empire. They keep demons out by enclosing the city within a great wall.
Humanity has achieved great things on the backs of slave Malakim.
Why the surprise, Laphicet? You've been here before, right?
I have.
Fuck you, Grail. I stand by that. They had an aesthetic that they were clearly going for.
Tethered Malakim aren't even allowed the freedom to observe their surroundings.
We'll soon lose such freedom ourselves. Huh? We've reached the heart of the Empire and of the Abbey. Soldiers and exorcists are stationed all around. This is no place for a collection of villains like us.
I'm not looking for a place. All I need to find is Artorias. That's it.
Did any of you either play that really old game? I think it was for the 360, the Saboteur. It was like, I think a World War II game, and you were a member of the Resistance. And the whole really cool aesthetic thing about the game was like all of the cities were in black and white, but you added color, I think primarily in like a red palette to the cities as you went through and underwent missions to basically sabotage the fascist regimes there. I just found myself thinking, like, especially as we're going into the heart of the Empire here and the seat of the authoritarianism that we were talking about with the Abbey, it would be so cool and not totally outside the storytelling palette of a game like Berseria if everything also went black and white. I know it doesn't, but that would be really neat. Yeah, I guess it is nice to have tonal shifts just to indicate like, okay, now you're out on the adventure part of the JRPG. Like we're now squarely out of the intro and into kind of the meat of the story, and music can be good for marking those sorts of transitions in a way that you kind of intuitively get, even if you don't stop and think about it. Yeah, I don't think I got all the way through it, Grail, because it wasn't really my kind of game, but it was the kind of game I could respect for having like really interesting and unusual artistic ideas of the story it wanted to tell, which for some games to me is even more worthwhile than a game with, you know, an interesting story that I can buy into for 30 to 40 hours or whatever.
If you want to live, get out of my way.
I want to remember, I just the Mystic Arts, I forgot. Okay, holding L2, that's the button I want. Kept trying to do that, but just triggering the burst arts instead. I'm telling you, Grail, I really think it's what I was talking about at the top of Wednesday's stream. I think the game wants you to get addicted to the claw. Because it's the embodiment of Velvet's Revenge Quest, and God knows she's addicted to it. It doesn't just consume her enemies, Grail, the claw consumes us!
I wish I had power like that.
I'd forget about it if I were you.
I do feel like it's nice to try out a very different combat style, especially with a character who has the distinctive meaning to us that Eizen has, though.
Just act natural.
Your face is all stiff.
I know.
What do I usually do with my face? How do I act normal? What's a normal face?
You, in the black coat. Show me your documentation. Well? Your travel permit from the Abbey, where is it?
Foolish girl, how many times have I told you? A magician's apprentice must wear a pleasant grin.
Magician?
Verily, I present to you the traveling troupe of mischievous misfits known across the land as Magilou's Menagerie.
Now this theme I like. This is fun and feels very Magilou.
Ceremony?
Why, yes, indeed we are, my dear. Please pardon my uncouth apprentice. Girl, allay the good man's fears and show him the dove trick you've spent all these weeks on.
I feel like you could say that about a lot of games, Grail, to be fair.
Oh, sorry, mistress. I forgot to prepare.
You pathetic little shirker! A proper performer is perpetually prepared!
It's fine. Doves flying around would be a nuisance.
No, this will not do. If you cannot summon a dove, then act like one. Act like a...
Oh, I love it.
Cool.
Velvet will do literally anything to get revenge on Artorias.
Remember,
Literally anything.
Menagerie manufactures mirth. That was just a small sample for the good citizenry of Loegres.
Hey, you can't advertise here! Move along!
As you say.
That was a fine ploy, Magilou.
Well, don't expect tricks like that every day. Coo. Murderous gaze.
Grail, please. Some decorum.
Those doves were amazing.
I ask for so little from you.
Just a crude trick. If anything, it just shows the capital's defenses are pathetic.
More like it shows how much confidence they have in those defenses. How many soldiers are here, Laphicet?
The number of exorcists in the capital? At least 1,000. And 2 divisions of guards.
I'd expect no less from the capital. They're not careless. They're covered.
That's true. That's a step in the right direction.
See how the citizens smile? To think they were fleeing from demons just a few years ago.
To hold an observance of this scale shows just how much peace their power has brought.
A piece paid for with Laffy's.
Velvet?
Sorry, new Laphicet. I'm pretty fucked up from what happened to old Laphicet.
Take a look at this.
You might even say I'm still processing it through my new
Well,
relationship with you.
Now here's a fine haul.
Yes, a nameless pirate flag. Oh, just what I always wanted.
It looks real tasty.
I forgot you find recipes this way too.
Scout ship setting.
Please. All right, we are in the capital. That's the kind of really banal plot point that you wouldn't expect to be a motif, but kind of is in the Tales games. Just like the need for and difficulties around travel permits. I guess because so many of these games have interesting subplots or sometimes somewhat major plots of like international conflicts and tension between kingdoms, which of course then is very easy to trickle down into difficulties with getting permission to travel from one to the other. Well, that's one of the first things in Tales of Destiny too. You end up in a strange land and need to figure out how to get a passport to get through a border town to the various kingdoms on either side of it. Of course, the real question is, was it more convincing for Velvet to be Magilou's apprentice or for Rose to convince Sergei that she was married to Saray? Which I think we decided Sergei still ardently believed at the end of Zestiria.
Oh, Prince Percival is the one ruling Midgand. He's the crown prince.
The crown prince? What happened to the king?
The king is in good health, but he's decided to withdraw from
Grail, come on, be reasonable. You and I both know it would cost $9.99 in order to get a perk like that.
public life and leave the kingdom to Prince Percival. He declared that a new way of thinking was needed to save the world from this crisis.
This king sounds like quite the guy.
Prince Percival is incredible too. He's following in the footsteps of the king by working hand in hand with Lord Artorias in the Abbey. As long as we have Lord Artorias and Prince Percival, the future of Midgand is bright. Ask anyone.
Got it. So all of Midgand is on Artorias' side.
Yeah, that's a good point, Grail. It's less of like a medium of exchange or a facilitator of commerce between different nations, and more of just like a means of control. Like, again, like you would get in an authoritarian or fascistic regime, right? Where even if it's people who are moving around within a single nation or city, like the state demands that they know what every single person is doing at all times, and that people are only able to operate and move and relocate and do things insofar as the state allows it. So it's just a totally different relationship between the individual's autonomy and like the legislation and arbitration of the state.
The Abbey's job is getting harder and harder. We've all got to give them our full support.
Let's backtrack a bit. Just what sort of organization is this Abbey?
The super good kind.
Kidding me? How do you not even know that?
The Abbey is part of Midgand's Church of the Empyreans. Originally, it was an order of paladins and warrior priests devoted to exorcising evil.
Yeah. The Abbey's official name is the Exorcist Abbey of the Church of Midgand. Nowadays, its members are all called exorcists.
I'm impressed. You've done your research.
So basically, they're just one branch of the church, right? Well, for a side branch, they don't really strike me as humble.
Of course not. The High Priest entrusted all his power to the Abbey's leader, Lord Artorias. He's effectively retired.
So the Abbey's leader is at the top of the entire church.
That's not all. The prince also gave Lord Artorias authority over all military and government affairs during the crisis.
Lord Artorias commands Midgand now, and has formed a new theocracy to combat the demon blight.
And that is the origin of the Holy Midgand Empire. The Abbey is its foundation, and its ray of hope.
Oh, come on, bro. I already made the Holy Roman Empire comparison. Now you're just making me feel like an idiot when you make it that explicit.
Wow, okay, got it. The Abbey's a big deal.
The Holy Midgand Empire. Even has the same cadence as Holy Roman Empire. This is interesting too, Grail, because I remember we were talking about the background conversation voices in cities, because we do have it back now. We're getting something similar to what we got in Zestiria, but I feel like they rebalanced it. Like, I don't feel as overwhelmed by it as I did in Zestiria. It feels more like just something that really is suitable to the background and doesn't totally break the believability of the world for me. I don't know, like Putin, kind of? Putin's that kind of leader. He actually, yeah, his brand of nationalism over in Russia actually draws a lot from kind of his support of the Orthodox Church. And interestingly, like a demonstrable focus on trying to like rehabilitate and support a lot of the church iconography and landmarks and architecture that were lost during the communist era in Russia. So definitely have some parallels there, I would say. Boy, we have stumbled into a trough for in-skits. Coming up empty time and again. I just want the characters to have some chats before bed with each other. Is that too much to ask? It is pretty interesting, Grail. Yeah, I don't know if I've told you this before, but I actually have like a weird and very random history with Russia, because when I was in undergrad, I like totally on accident had this opportunity to like train in Russian bell ringing on like a big set of bells in a bell tower in the upperclassman house where I lived my later 3 years in undergrad. And so I actually ended up going over to Russia on 2 different trips to like train in bell ringing with like actual Russian monks. And so I got like way more exposure to the culture than I ever expected. Of course, this was way before everything that started to happen with the Ukraine in more recent history. But I'll tell you, it was so different being over there and like talking with actual just regular citizens on the ground and seeing like what they thought of Putin and what they thought of their government versus what they thought of the states and everything that was going on over here at the time. It's a totally different experience than anything that you get on the news or kind of through the lenses of the rhetoric of Western reporters.
Mommy, when's the prince gonna talk? The exorcists are coming too, right?
I'm sure they will, dear. People are saying it's going to be a very important announcement about the Abbey.
I want to see the exorcists! We need to thank them for saving us from the demons!
You're right. We all have to show them our gratitude and help them however we can.
Yeah! I'll follow the rules, too. I won't be selfish.
They sure are popular.
Because these people don't know the truth.
You think that's so? That the exorcists are fighting the demons they themselves cannot. That's why the people support the exorcists.
Velvet's mad. There's no magic combination of words you can say to get her to believe that the Abbey's doing anything positive.
Go on, take a good look.
Well, it's early days still, Grail. I'm sure we'll have plenty of opportunity to wrestle with exactly what they are. Yeah, I'm really interested and looking forward to it because when I last played this, I did not have the sufficiently fresh context from Zestiria to really relate the Abbey and Artorias' activities in depth to everything that Saray and the gang did in Zestiria, so I'm sure we will have plenty of good conversations comparing and contrasting them this time around. Alright, I'm going to say we have enough options right now. We can work on respecking the characters a bit later. Is there anything we can enhance? Cool. I spy a cat's chest. Damn. What's it all for if we can't save the cats? If we can't save one cat, how can we be expected to save the world? Okay, before we get into this scene, I'm going to dip for 1 second just because I'm realizing I forgot to plug my computer in. So I just have to grab the charger quick so that we don't suddenly go off stream due to a lack of battery. Yeah, saving cats or redeeming the honor of disgraced toidles, right? Any number of side quests would be appropriate in that vein.
Listen to those cheers. The royals sure have these folks in line.
Subjects, may I have your attention? It is I, Percival Asgard, Crown Prince of the Midgard Empire. His Majesty, my father, and I are pleased to celebrate with you on this auspicious day.
I'm so fucking stoked!
After the opening 10 years ago, our kingdom faced an existential threat, both from demons and the terrible spread of demon light. However, one man raised a miraculous sword and stood so that the body and soul of the land
Over there.
would not be lost.
Climb up if you want, but attacking now would
And
be
the
suicide.
name of that man was Artorias Coldbrand. None here, I trust, are unfamiliar with Artorias' noble act. To bring us salvation from demons, he sacrificed...
Yeah, an announcer or like
He's a murderer.
the Wizard of Oz, the man behind the curtain.
Lord Inominat, one of the 5 Imperiums, and blessed us with the strength of the Malachite.
But he's a murderer!
He serves as a shining beacon of reason in this world of turmoil. And reason is what binds us.
But you killed him. You took everything that I loved.
So raise your voices in praise to Artorias' devoted work, to the Savior who purifies evil and guides our flock. Let us call him our shepherd.
Oh! You know what that means. But wait, if he's the shepherd, then what that would mean? No. Jesus Christ, that is a crowd. Potentially the first Saray.
Even though the world was filled with suffering, I had to ask something tremendous of you all. I entrusted you to endure the pains of reason. I asked you to bind yourselves with shackles of your own will. For the only blade that can expel calamity is one forged from unshaking reason and the iron will to do what must be done. And now that very blade stands ready before all of us today. I offer my body and my life in service to the people of this great land. With the blessings of the Empyrean Innominat, I will guide you to a world without calamity. And this world's suffering will be nothing but a distant memory!
Are you being sarcastic or sincere, Grail? I could see it going either way, that's why I asked.
But you're the one who murdered.
Fool, they'll see us.
You're the one who killed Laphicet.
What?
Wow. Before we go on, that's such a cool scene. That's one that I vividly remember from my first playthrough. Couple things to notice just to keep in mind as we go forward. First, especially after we spent that time at the start of last stream talking about the symbolism of Velvet's arm, claw, whatever you want to call it, as this living testament to her revenge that is keeping her going and also being repurposed as a tool and power, though it was created as her current state was by Artorias in the first place. The fact that she is so viscerally focused on using that tool to climb up that parapet and reach the vantage point from which to see him, insisting over and over again, you killed him, you're a murderer, I think is a really good symbol, similarly for how she's leaning on that thirst for revenge in order to persist in the world and see through what it is that she wants to do. Like that is her direct and only source of power and persistence. Interesting too, talking about like the content of Artorias' speech, like you were saying, Grail, that line he had, which was something to the effect of like binding yourself with shackles of your own will, to this idea of reason and a fixed kind of trajectory in your life to live according to certain values. As you say, there's a sense in which, especially seeing that from Velvet's perspective, that can sound villainous, but I think it's going to be really important and interesting and cool for us to keep in mind as we go forward in the story, whether and how that perspective really differs from what we got in Zestiria. Because remember, one of the things that we talked about in Zestiria over and over again was the importance of being purified from malevolence by virtue of recognizing the things that you care about and then acting in such a way that was like authentically serving the value of those things, which is similarly a particular kind of binding of your will or constraining it according to particular parameters, not saying that you can act just in accordance with whatever, but that you're kind of obligated to find those things that you value and act according to the honor that they merit. So something that maybe we'll end up feeling is different than Artorias, but I think at least at this point, as we're first being introduced to Artorias as a shepherd, just as Saray was a shepherd, right? The game is putting to us the challenge of, as we're going through Velvet's journey, also unpacking like what is it really that makes the difference between someone like Artorias and someone like Saray, for whom we had a lot of respect and understanding by the end of Zestiria before this.
The shepherd Artorias. That's who you're after?
Oh, and here I was, hoping you'd just straight up pounce on him.
That would be certain death. No, I need a sword of reason and will. That's the only thing that can kill him.
Killing Lord Artorias.
Playing it safe? Boring! Regrettably, it is at this juncture we go our separate ways. I've got a bit of hunting to do.
No one's stopping you.
Wouldn't you be? That'd be like if she was like, yeah, come to the city. I'm hunting someone. And then you show up and she's like, yeah, you see him? That's him. I'm going to murder Jesus Christ. How could you not be flabbergasted?
Farewell. May your days be fruitful and your nights tormented.
If our enemy's calling himself a shepherd, he won't be going into hiding. Let's take this slowly.
The old man behind him. Melchior, I take it?
Yeah.
Let's gather information on these people. If we know what they're planning, we can find a weakness.
They're the most powerful men in the land. If we're going to look into them, we need a lead first.
Eisen, do you have any underworld contacts in the capital itself? Like your friend at the port?
I don't go inland much, I'm afraid. But Eifried has close ties to a shadow guild. A tavern in the city, run by an old man called Baskerville, serves as a front for them.
A shadow guild? Those sorts of things actually exist?
That settles it. Let's head to that tavern. They'll have food, I'm sure.
Why not?
All right, to the tavern.
My stomach made a weird noise.
It
That's
sure
another
did,
sign
buddy.
that you're alive.
Not quite as beautiful a sign as the symbolism that Velvet brought up in that same vein last time, but perhaps a more viscerally human sign.
The exorcists sure were out in full force to see the shepherd's
Thanks, Pink Moon
inauguration,
Echo.
weren't they?
Good looking out.
What about that guy you're after? Was he there?
What, and have to stand around looking all proper? Nah, that's not his style.
Then I thought he was one of the top exorcists.
That wouldn't matter to him.
Huh. All right.
Actually, Velvet, speaking of the shepherd, I noticed he wasn't using his right arm. Was he hurt or something?
Yeah, he was badly wounded a long time ago. He lost the use of his sword arm.
That's what I figured.
But don't get the wrong idea. He's still a master swordsman with his left arm.
I can tell that from the way he moves. His movements are steady and measured, and his chi is centered below his navel.
Huh? Why does that matter?
Some people say that all the body's spiritual energy gathers in a place about 2 finger widths below the navel.
Even when he appears to be in a state of total peace, his guard is never down. He's a formidable adversary. And I think I know why my target has placed himself at Artorias' side. Because now I want to take Artorias down too.
Rokuro, my man. That's an interesting point of parallelism too. I hadn't put that together until they were explicitly talking about Artorias' arm, but his right arm, his sword arm, was injured before the events of the story, and Velvet's left arm was the one that was mangled and transformed by Artorias. So they kind of have complementary wounds in a certain sense. Yeah, I love that observation, Grail. It seems like they all really bring their own different senses of worldly understanding to the party in a way that makes a lot of these skits feel like you are getting, you know, a more robust and comprehensive education based on the conversations between them. That's right.
Shepherd, savior of mankind who guides us through the darkness. What an appropriate title for Lord Artorias. I believe in him. As long as we have Shepherd Artorias, we'll make it through this era of disaster.
Shepherd Artorias?
How pompous can you get?
Artorias has already seized control of all religious and secular power in Midgand. But now that he's taken on this new title, he's no longer just an authority figure. He's become the very hope of the masses.
A dangerous opponent indeed.
After seeing that, will you still fight him?
Well, he's got a lot of other stuff going for him in the just like me category, Grail, so you can't have it all.
No matter what.
It's a good question, Pink Moon Echo. No. I think it's usually pretty good about giving us a decently loud notification about the expedition return. It is crazy, but it's interesting, like, the way everyone is being labeled as a zealous believer. I mean, we talked about Putin. The other thing that this really echoes to me is, you know, you read some of the literature and historical studies of Hitler's rise to power, and a lot of it is pretty similar in terms of, yeah, it seemed like he came out of nowhere and everyone was in support of him right away, but it was kind of like the horrifically perfect storm of all these different circumstances of Germans' disillusionment and lack of national identity, and Hitler kind of appearing in the right place at the right time with the right rhetoric to give a lot of them like a feeling and sense of direction that they had been missing up until that point. So it's something I think really scary and bewildering about that, but I think scary and bewildering because it's the kind of human behavior that can actually happen in the real world just as much as a JRPG. All right. It's interesting too. I wonder how many more context clues we're going to get about the nature of the shepherd, because I feel like with what some people are saying so far, it's pretty ambiguous as to whether there had also been shepherds in the past, and he's being called the shepherd to kind of harken back to and invoke that history of the world and these heroic figures of the past, or if it's a new term that they coined for Artorias based on his role in overcoming the demons and demon blight and forming the Abbey. Because those two possibilities would put us in pretty starkly different situations in terms of where in the world's overall history we are situated in this narrative.
He may be the shepherd now, but no one knows who he was before the Advent, or what he did.
No, they don't.
But he showed up one day with a mallet in tow, routed the demons, and formed a band of skilled young exorcists.
Well, it's a cycle, right? But that's part of why it's interesting, Grail, because it's, like, remember, especially in contrast with Zestiria, like Zestiria with a voiced over narrator was super explicit up front about saying this is a cycle that's happened over and over since time immemorial. You know, malevolence appears, a shepherd appears, shepherd redeems the world. We don't really have that same structure in Berseria. So even if it's the case that over the world's history, this is a cycle that comes and goes and ebbs and flows, presumably that cycle also had to start somewhere. And so I think it's an interesting and valid question for us to be asking at this point. Like, are we just at a point in the cycle where people have forgotten about the past and it's kind of coming to the fore once again? Or are we actually witnessing like the very start of the cycle? And with a little bit of how they've talked around and not really understood the nature of demon blight so far, that kind of has me wondering whether it could be the start of the cycle if demon blight were really the advent of malevolence that kicked it all off. And we're sort of seeing like a window into the origins of the world, not just one of many iterations, but I don't think we have enough information either way to really answer that yet. I think it's just interesting to think about and keep track of as we go on here.
That sounds pretty suspicious.
Right? But the kingdom readily acknowledged his abilities and his conviction, and threw its full support behind him.
Maybe he plans on usurping power for himself.
Not likely. He's worked tirelessly to rebuild the church and state, and shore up the royal family's position.
Lining his pockets from the state coffers, then.
Not the slightest chance. Rather, he's got all the other higher-ups worried he's working himself to death.
Then what's he after?
Maybe there is no ulterior motive. Maybe he is our shepherd. Whatever the case, if he hadn't shown up when he did 3 years ago, Midgand would be a smoking ruin.
There we go.
Take a look at this.
Yeah, that music cue is harder for me to miss than the little skit triangle in the bottom right-hand corner.
I knew this would be big. What a treasure!
Eizen gets so excited about it. I love it. Rangetsu basic training. All right. I want more areas to explore. I guess this is what we've got for now.
Scout ship setting sail.
And they're off. Oh, we get more experience now thanks to that skill we picked up. Sweet.
Lord Artorias' speech was so wonderful. I teared up halfway through.
I was so worried when the demons appeared. I'm so glad I put my faith in the Abbey.
The exorcists put their lives on the line to protect us. We've got to do what we can to help.
I want to marry the shepherd when I grow up.
Now that's popularity.
Ignorance is bliss.
People don't think a lot of Oscar's family. Oscar and Teresa's family, I guess I should say. It's interesting, though, that she wasn't named in this conversation, whereas Oscar was. Ooh. Talk about unnerving, larger-than-life music.
Come, sinner, and repent your wicked deeds.
Repent? Are you talking to me?
Yes. When I look at your vestments around your chest, your hips, I can tell your sins are many and deep.
Tough but fair, priest.
Again?
Tough but fair.
Exactly what were you staring at?
Well, mankind is rife with sin, and I am no different. You must acknowledge your misdeeds and confess them to the great Empyreans. By confronting your sinful urges, you will be empowered to resist them.
Is that so?
That's
You're
true.
saying I just need to confess all the bad things I've done.
Yes, confess your darkest sins, my child, assured that none is beyond the forgiveness of the Empyreans.
Empyreans, hear my confession. When I was in prison, I instigated a riot and used it to break myself out.
Huh?
Then I set fire to some warehouses in town and stole a ship to make my getaway.
Jesus Christ!
I teamed up with some pirates to destroy a military fortress. I killed anyone who
What
got
the
in my
fuck?
way.
What the fuck?
What do you think, Father? Will the Empyreans forgive me?
I think you should turn yourself into the Abbey and let them help you repent.
That's convenient. I'm already planning on going to the Abbey. You see, I'm going to kill their boss, Artorias.
When a priest thinks you're going to confess really vanilla adultery, and instead you talk about how you committed mass murder.
About how I figured it'd go.
Good talk.
That is one impressive cathedral. It fits the capital.
What a throne.
Yes. It's incredible.
It's as I heard. It wasn't built using Moloch arts, but the latest architectural engineering techniques. Look at those arches, the mathematical logic, the structural ornamentation. This is an architectural marvel.
So, is that Empyrean in there?
I highly doubt it. Empyrean worship has become mostly symbolic over the years. This cathedral wasn't built as a place of worship. It's commemorative, to celebrate the continent's unification.
In other words, the show of power.
That explains why they spared no expense.
It's too early to be impressed. This is just the entrance, and it's unfinished. They're constructing a colossal temple inside here. They say it'll take centuries to complete.
Yeah, and a pretty similar nerd
That's
to
insane.
Saray, Pink
that's a
Moon
good
Echo,
idea.
as you were saying
Your
last
guess
time.
is as good as mine. I suppose that sometimes humans just have a need to push their limits.
Yeah, seriously.
The Reaper and a demon are shaking their heads at this overwrought monstrosity. Intrinsic worth, 0.
I wonder what it'll look like when it's finished.
Yeah, that's a good question about the giant seats grail. I feel like my assumption is typically in religious places such as this, it's meant to be like the seat of a god or something that's similarly representational in terms of like having a physical representation of the place for the divine to rest. But I don't know enough about the actual history of the practice. Oh, right. Did that already. Oh, what shiny pink moon echo? Did I miss something? I wasn't meaning to miss something. I was just not paying attention. Oh, you mean all the way over here? Is that what you're looking at? I don't see any others. I'll try to pay closer attention. Yeah, I think that's a really great observation, Grail. I would agree with that. It seems like sort of the baseline navigation and world background music is maybe not anything to write home about in terms of like the broader context of the various sorts of background music you get in the series. But I do feel myself pretty reliably moved by stuff like Velvet's theme, and as you said, the villain's theme in the church. Almost like they, I don't want to say like they were written by different composers, but there definitely seems to be a pretty stark difference between them, more so than you would get in another game. No, if anything, Grail, I have the opposite deficiency. I get way too hyper-focused, and so I end up missing everything that's not directly in whatever line of inquiry I'm obsessing over at that moment. But you two help me to see the forest for the trees. Yeah, I remember us having a good time with that. Hellevies, right? Back in those sweet and scarce moments before we burned it to the ground.
What'll it be?
Some food for the boy.
Mabo curry is our specialty. It takes a week to stew properly.
Mabo curry.
Some of that, then. Say, do you know a man named Baskerville? I heard we might find him here.
That old man? A scoundrel and criminal who went against the rules of the Abbey. They executed him long ago.
Oh.
Velvet, this Mabo curry is amazing.
You get along so well. Is he your brother?
Oh, thanks, Grail. I'll have to try that the next time we have a scene like that. I hadn't realized.
No, he wouldn't be, would he? After all, your brother was murdered before your eyes.
How do you know that?
The shadows watch those who flinch from the light.
So the guild is still active, even after Baskerville's arrest?
That's right. Just like how Eifried's crew continues their piracy even without their captain.
So you're the contact?
What may I help you with?
I want to know what Artorias is planning.
Information such as that, it won't come cheap. I have here a list of jobs, not one remotely legal. Take care of all of them, and I'll tell you what you want to know.
Well, we are a super adept band of criminals, so sounds like the best kind of jobs for us. Let's foil an ambush. That sounds fun. Stop an ambush aimed at the Royal Medical Society on the Danon Highway. All right.
Take this with you as documentation. It's fake.
Oh, that's got to just be a coincidence, but it's a cool coincidence and overlap. We have the Danon Highway here, and then Dana and Rena in Tales of Arise. I don't think it's spelled quite the same way, but pretty similar.
But it's a good fake. It'll hold up to inspection.
It's registered to Mogulu's menagerie.
Excellent.
Was that not the name you gave to the guard at the gate?
Regrettably.
I can see you're a group to be reckoned with.
Report back here once you're finished. However, be aware that should you fail...
Then this conversation never took place. Got it. I'll cause you no trouble.
I appreciate your understanding. You're welcome to stay the night, free of charge. Forget about work until the morning comes.
Rokuro fucking tying one off in the background.
Right. You're missing Captain Eifried.
Well, if they knew everything else, Grail, I mean, of course they would also know that.
The captain
it's a foregone
has done
conclusion.
much toward our viability. I promise that I'll share anything I hear about him for no charge.
Thanks. All we know is there was a pendulum on the ground at the last place he was seen. And that Legate Melchior is connected to the captain's disappearance. How? We don't know.
My boys! I love their relationship already.
Sounds like you've got problems of your own. Do you really have time to take on ours as well?
I could ask you why
Agreed,
you tied
Grail.
yourself up with Velvet.
Me? I've got a debt to repay. Without her, there's no way I'd have ever found my blade again.
A demon repaying a debt? Ridiculous.
As ridiculous as a pirate Moloch, you think? No matter how you look at it, there's nothing reasonable about our rogue existence. And in this brave new world governed by reason, a rogue can either rage and become a monster like me,
or band together with others. Like a ship full of pirates, perhaps.
Exactly. I admire Velvet's courage, squaring off against the whole world on her own. Few can accomplish that. It takes strength, real strength, and I'm curious where it comes from.
So you're doing it for yourself after all?
Is that so wrong?
No. I'm the same.
I think he just caught it from the
I
tavern.
need allies on my side, with the strength and courage to combat this so-called order.
I mean, that's where
imposed by
Eizen got the
Abbey.
whiskey, right?
But anyone who's willing to put up with the creed folly of Eifried's pirates has to be an even bigger fool than we are. So I'm like you. I want to know how deep her foolishness goes.
She'd kill you if she heard that, you know.
It's a compliment. Fools that big aren't born every day.
Aha. And I imagine your dear Captain Eifried's much the same.
Aye. That man flies his full flag proudly.
The Shepherd Artorias, He's got the populace eating from the palm of his hand. I wonder... just how deeply will the fangs of our would-be tragic heroine scar this broken world of ours? I've got a traitor to find, but in the meantime, this should be a good show.
Yeah, Greek Grail, a very similar vibe. It's almost like we can think about this more, but I feel like there's a reason that this particular kind of party and game needs that sort of heart-to-heart conversation much, much earlier in its story, where everyone is kind of so single-minded and self-directed that they really need to find some reason to bond pretty quickly in order to stay banded together as a party at all. Whereas in a lot of other JRPGs, the characters who find each other are more willing to extend just a basic level of trust before they really bond with each other. And so they don't really need that until they, are really intimately acquainted with one another and getting ready to head off to the final confrontation. But yeah, definitely lends itself to a different cadence in the story, I would say. It's funny, I think of it as snow area conversations too because of Flanor and Tales of Symphonia, but like going back and playing the games, not many of them happen in snow areas. I think maybe Fantasia's. It's been a while since I've played that. But like Vesperia is in, like the Orneon, like the encampment that Flynn has put together. Tales of the Abyss takes place across like a range of towns and on the ship. So it feels snowy in my mind, I think, because of Symphonia. It's funny how that can color your experience of the overall series and the trope.
A kind face for such a hard woman.
She knew about me in our cover. She's got ears everywhere.
Yeah, I was thinking about that and the cats too. I feel like very few of them are actually giving us accessories so far.
I heard that her predecessor, Baskerville, was a monument against authority. To think he was executed.
They've lost their leader, but remain unconquered. Not an organization to trifle with.
That's how they have to be to take on the Abbey. We'd better succeed on our missions, and not just to get the information we need.
Yeah. Besides, I'd like to get another of those drinks, too.
You're a man of taste. That place always has the best.
You'd better work hard, too, if you want more Mabo curry.
I will.
Yeah, I guess that's fair, Grail. I had forgotten about the Ketterberg stuff before the Absorption Gate. I was thinking more about like the endgame heart-to-hearts. But I guess you do oftentimes have mid-game ones as well. And I'd forgotten about Arise too. It's a fair point. Still, though, like when all of the games have that kind of scene, that's, I guess, a sizable minority, but still a minority of the games that feature snow. I wonder what that is. Like if there's something about that kind of scene that just naturally lends itself to a snowy environment, so it makes sense to us when we see it, even if we don't see it in that many of the games overall. I don't know what that would be. Maybe just when it's cold and snowy outside, there's a natural urge to like huddle together and share warmth and kind of have the sort of human-to-human intimacy and contact that begets those sort of heart-to-heart conversations.
So, somebody means to ambush the Royal Medical Society on the Danan Highway.
The Royal Medical Society is a group of doctors.
Fair enough, Grail. Appreciate that.
They're funded by donations.
I'll catch up
given
before
by
long.
Ordinary folk.
Why would anyone attack them?
Don't ask me. Some people are just twisted.
And why would an underworld group defend them?
Who knows? Something to do with the attackers, perhaps?
That ceremony was simply fantastic.
Lord Artorias' speech was brilliant, of course, but Prince Percival was really something too. He raises up Artorias to help the country and its people, then willingly steps down. Now that's what I call a king.
You think so? Well, to me, he just looks like a wimp.
He may look that way, but he has a great inner strength. He's excelled as a scholar and a leader since he was young. His only hobby is falconry, but sadly I hear he hasn't had the time for it lately.
You seem like a big supporter of his.
Well, he's got 2 younger brothers, but just between you and me, they're dolts. Worse, they hang with a bad crowd. If anything were to happen to Prince Percival, the future of Midgand would be bleak.
I see. So everyone's hopes are riding on him then.
Which means Midgand's vulnerable without him.
Denon Highway,
Greetings,
alright.
Magilou's menagerie. You've come to exactly the right place.
You must be a Bloodwing. What do you want?
You already know about the Code Red demons, right?
The really strong demons the Abbey wants gone? Yeah.
Would you ever consider hunting them down for us? We'll reward you properly.
Reward? Why pay us when the Abbey would do it for free?
It's complicated. The Abbey is calculating in their deployments, especially where Code Red demons are concerned.
I get it. They'll only act if they determine the demon would cause more harm than the losses they'd incur in battling it. That does seem logical.
But sometimes
Utilitarian,
people have
you
lost a
might
loved
say.
one to such a demon. Or sometimes they have a connection to the person the demon used to be. Wherever there's a Code Red demon, you can bet there are people willing to pay good money to have it killed.
And let me guess, that's where the Bloodwings come in.
Exactly. There are Bloodwings all throughout Midgand who have information on these Code Red demons. If you defeat a demon and report back to my comrades, they'll make sure you're well compensated.
All right, I understand. But I won't make any promises.
That's fine. No sense in drawing up a contract when the hunter probably won't survive anyway. If you get results, let us know. We'll hold up our end. That being said, I'd feel guilty if I didn't help out at least a little, so here, take this.
Those Bloodwings are definitely a rough crowd.
To be fair, things are never that straightforward when you're dealing with demons.
All that matters is that there's something in it for us if we hunt those Code Red demons. The only thing better than fighting formidable foes is getting paid for it.
Just remember that these Code Red demons are tough enough to make the Abbey shiver. We'd be wise not to underestimate them.
We should talk to those Bloodwings before considering any of the marks. They might have information that will help us prepare.
Yeah, and we better remember to upgrade our equipment.
Right.
Good advice.
Hey, Laphicet.
What is it, Roguro?
Mabo curry.
Huh? Oh.
Mean.
You're an interesting one. You like Mabo curry that much, huh?
It smells good. And it's creamy and kind of spicy. Eating it made me feel nice.
I'd say you love it then. Do all Malakim have such an appetite?
Each has their own tastes. Some eat a lot, some eat a little. Just like humans or demons.
What do you like, Eizen?
Drinks, I suppose.
What else?
My man.
Pretty much just drinks.
Look, I'm a fucking pirate.
Like anything else?
What do you want from me?
Is it a problem if I don't?
No. I'm just wondering.
For me, it's drinks and candied sweet potatoes.
That's where you boil strips of sweet potato in oil and then coat them in sugar, right?
Yeah, I never get tired of them.
So you like to drink, but you've also got a sweet tooth?
Yeah. Is that so strange?
No.
Candied sweet potatoes. Sounds good.
There's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just a sign that you're alive, remember?
Right.
I guess that is a nice way of thinking about it, Grail, where it's kind of believable that there would be so many different crazy strong demons, because if there really is a demon blight that is inexplicably plaguing the world, transforming ordinary creatures into demons and causing them to mutate and propagate and everything over the course of years, like, it would almost be more surprising if there weren't a wide range of superpowered demons. Yeah, I'd agree with that, Pink Moon Echo. I do think they put a lot of care into the design of their menus, even if it's never been my favorite thing about the games. I can respect that.
I'll cut down anyone in my way!
One other thing that's worth keeping in mind just before we get too far away from it, with the conversation that the Bloodwings rep was having about the code red marks with Velvet and the crew, and I know this will come up a lot more in the story, but it's worth just flagging early to keep in mind, because we're talking about, well, what are the different registers of logic and reason versus emotion and intuition, and how might what the Abbey is doing square or not square with what Saray and his compatriots were doing in Tales of Zestiria. When the Bloodwings member was talking about the calculus of the Abbey in terms of whether or not they would decide to send a party out based on the damage they could mitigate versus the damage that they would incur in the hunting party, that very directly calls to mind, but I think I said it at the time, but the idea of utilitarianism, they're referring to it as logic, but utilitarianism being kind of a logic, almost economically informed approach to morality, where it's usually boiled down to some version of, something is only good in accordance with the amount of like pleasure or happiness or positive outcomes that it propagates, and that has to be weighed against the negative aspects of the outcomes in order to determine whether something on net is worth doing or not from a moral standpoint. That's going to be important because, well, that's a very instrumentalist, and again, like you might think of as logic and reason kind of calculus to determining what the right thing is. It contrasts very starkly with other schools of morality that are broadly called deontology, which broadly speaking just say that whatever it is in virtue of which something is morally good or morally bad has nothing to do with the outcome of those actions and everything to do with the essential nature of those actions. So like a typical deontological model of morality would be something like Kant's argument, and what's called the categorical imperative, basically saying that something is only morally right if it's the kind of action that you could will to be a universal law. So the kind of thing that everyone could follow in a way that's logical and doesn't bring about contradictions. And of course, we could spend like, a million streams talking about what that really means and unpacking it in the way that you would in a philosophy class, or like Kant did in his works. But the important distinction being there's something that, especially within this game, seems to be painted as logical or reasons-based approach to governance and morality, which looks a lot like utilitarianism. And there's something totally different in terms of deciding what is right based on like the values that an action consists in. And I think if we keep a hold of that distinction, we might have an easier time recognizing at the end of the day that actually, if we look at what the Abbey is doing versus what was happening in Tales of Zestiria, it's pretty obvious that what they're after is something that is just foundationally different than the approach that Saray and the rest of his crew had to doing the right thing in the world and empowering people to act according to their beliefs and their dreams and everything like that. But we'll have plenty of occasions to return to that, I'm sure. I know, I'm telling you, between these tavern scenes and Lafisette's tummy, I feel like I need like some kind of good tavern food to nosh on and a good drink for a Friday night.
Scout ship setting sail.
But a stream vibe is good too.
Looks like you want to die. Ready to die? Think you can dodge? Just try. Perfect mayhem.
Awesome.
We're finished here. Let's go.
I had a good burger earlier today. That was my lunch. That was nice. I had like a lightly toasted bun, just right, nice and warm. And then a nice like quarter pounder burger with some Parmesan cheese on it, I think. And then I had some leftover cream spinach from when I made it as a side with a steak a while ago, so I slapped that right on top. Finished it off with some ketchup and mayo. Oh, chef's kiss. Yeah, Eizen's a pretty cool guy. On a scale of 1 to Eizen, he is definitely cool.
Hey, get out of our way! That there!
Oh no! Not the demon blade.
So the attackers were demons. I guess that's why they needed us to stop the attack.
The doctors?
Looks like they ran off. It appears they were after this stuff.
Medicine with the cathedral seal.
That scarf, did that belong to the attackers?
Yeah, all three were wearing them. Does it mean something?
They were just demons. Aggressive ones who attack the innocent.
I have no follow-up questions. What do you mean, Grail? Just in terms of the, like, the brutal meta challenge level you've imposed on it? Do you feel like it's given you any new surprising insights into the game yet? Like the way it's built or the relationship between the characters or anything?
You won't get any pity or compassion from me. Your style is really unique.
Just wait until I pull out the good stuff.
Oh, I see. Powerful when things are going well, but then things can kind of just turn on a dime. Yeah, I think we were talking about this on Wednesday too, if I remember right, but I don't love that special feeling of a Tales boss who can just suddenly, with no rhyme or reason to it, knock out your whole party and you have no recourse against it.
By the way, those folks we just
Oh, I
passed
went in
were
the wrong
talking
direction,
about
I think.
us.
What were they saying?
They were warning each other to be careful, talking about the demons that burned down Helives and destroyed the Seagate Fortress being near
Oh,
the
that's
capital.
us!
Considering how bold we've been, everyone's still fairly calm about it.
We'll be famous soon enough once we kill the world's savior.
Sounds like that could get fun.
Fun? Why?
The people trying to capture us will put prices on our heads and put up wanted posters everywhere. Depending on who draws the likenesses, each portrait can look completely different. You know what I'm talking
Ah,
about.
yes, I
right, Eizen?
remember those bosses fondly.
I've seen dozens of pictures of myself.
Using fondly very
Some make me a
loosely
monster,
there.
Others make me a handsome youth. It's fascinating, really.
I hope I get a poster soon.
Then do your best to really stir things up.
Right. I'll stir everything up good.
My favorite recurring gag in the Tales series, the wanted posters. I smiled because I had forgotten not only is the wanted poster a thing in Tales of Vesperia, but also there's a cameo of the classic Lloyd Irving wanted poster from Tales of Symphonia in Vesperia. Since we're already here and there's an exclamation point, it's not as if I can ignore it. He's with the right crew to become a terrible person. That's for sure.
Have you heard? The Abbey is building a new base. I hear it's a huge temple in the middle of some mountains near a site of ancient ruins. If they've got time to build a temple,
Yeah,
they
just
should
like
use it to
Rapunzel's
kill more
wanted
demons
posters make me an
instead.
echo.
You sure you want to talk like that here?
Ha! I'm different from all those losers who swoon over the shepherd's pretty words and ignore reality. No one's found a way to cure demon blight yet, and demons are still swarming everywhere. Sure, maybe things are not as bad as they could have been, but we still have no idea what's going to happen next. Think about it. Demons could be infiltrating the city as we speak, and we'd be none the wiser.
Shit, you're right.
You're completely right.
Is this cat's worth talking to? No. I'm not going to play that balloon popping minigame. I have acid flashbacks to it, even though I haven't played it in 6 years. That's all I need to know that it's not worth going back to. Alright, now we can go back to the capital. Oh, did those bottles we get, will they warp us to the capital? That would be kind of nice. The enough bottle? Oh, we can't use it here. I guess it has to be on the field. Yeah, the waiter minigames I can pretty much always get behind. The minigames are so hit or miss for me in the Tales series. I guess just in general, it takes a special kind of minigame for me to really feel like, oh yes, this is like justified in the world and interesting and worthwhile. So oftentimes I feel like they're kind of needlessly challenging and don't contribute that much to my understanding of the overall story or the characters. Like, poor Dan regaled me with stories of how he absolutely lost his mind during the Cats minigames in Tales of Symphonia to get Genus's One World.
You'll be rust on
I don't
my
think I
blade.
even bothered with those on my playthrough of the remastered version. Well, and to be fair, Grail, I mean, it's a sliding scale. I would say, like, I can tolerate and play the waiter minigames. That doesn't mean like I'm gonna spend hours on them or go out of my way for them.
We're finished here. Let's go.
What was one that I liked? I feel like there has to be at least one Tales minigame I can pick out as having really enjoyed. I would hope so, anyways.
I'll cut down
Don't even get me started on fishing minigames. If you want things that will get me to scream at the TV, no questions asked. I think I almost just got turned around for a second time. I guess the like the quest line of Repeat conquering his rival in Vesperia is, I would call that a mini game. I mean, maybe some people would argue that because it's not really self-contained in the way that a mini game typically is, but traveling around the world and marking all of the territory as repeats, that definitely felt mini gamey to me. And it was grueling and frustrating, and I felt like I wasn't going to be able to finish it, but it was one where, after I did finish it, I felt a sense of accomplishment and narrative insight, and like it had been worth my time, even though it was really grindy. That's the kind of thing that I'll buy into. There you go, Grail. Moving and shaking. Look at you.
That wasn't worth the effort.
Well, yeah, but that's exactly what I'm saying, Grail. Like, I like the mini games when they give you, like, not only optional insights into characters you're really interested in, but insights that are kind of gated behind mini game mechanics that have special meaning for those characters. Like, obviously, if you have a dog character, how cool and fitting is it to help them piss around the world, right? Whereas I feel like with a lot of the mini games, like, you know, the cats ones to challenge Genus and Tales of Symphonia, or even like the warehouse mini games that you get in something like Abyss or Vesperia, like, I oftentimes feel like they don't shed light on any given character in a similar way, which I think is a big part of why I get off the boat and don't spend that much time on a lot of the mini games.
Well, we've learned one thing coming to the capital. The Abbey and Shepherd Artorias have expanded their power immensely.
They might as well be the Empire now. They have the undying support of the populace.
The Shepherd, savior of humanity.
I wonder what he meant by the blessings of the Empyrean Innominat.
That's what they call the gods they worship in church, right? The Empyreans? He promised a lot in that speech. But can he really command such a power?
I have no idea. Not even we Malakim know of them beyond the stories and legends. He called Innominat the 5th Empyrean. There should only be 4, one ruling each element.
Is he talking about a new Empyrean?
Have you heard anything Laffy said?
Sorry. I don't know anything about this.
It doesn't matter. We should be careful about taking his words at face value. The man is no saint. He'll stop at nothing to achieve his aims. But there's no way he could have a god at his beck and call.
Don't underestimate the Abbey.
Trust me, I'm not. That's why I'm using the Shadow Guild to help us hunt them down. And to make sure that I kill him.
Oh, Pink Moon Echo. Yeah, thanks so much for showing up. Always great chatting and hanging with you. I'll hope to see you Monday. We'll be back same time, 7 p.m. Eastern, for our continued adventures. And the VOD will be up in case you want to catch up on the last 30 minutes over the weekend. A pleasure. Yeah, see, Grail, that's one of those things where, like, from the armchair, you would think that it's saint-like to have a goal of making a peaceful world. But then you hear about ways of making a peaceful world, like the Age of Lifeless Beings, and then you start to think, oh, maybe not all of the implementations of that are especially saint-like. I feel like the picking apart of villain plots in Tales games more often than not veer along some sort of trajectory of that kind.
You're good at what you do. I'm impressed.
Destroy goods. All right. Oh, and we just went to Port Saxon. Oh, we'll
There's
go back.
still more to do. I'm sure it'll be easy for you.
That was his problem, though, dude. He was the only one in his circle.
Doesn't sound very nice.
He had so many off ramps when he could have come up with like better solutions or plans if he only was willing to listen to feedback from anyone who cared about him. But that was his entire conceit. I think the more I've thought about Mythos Yggdrasil over the years is that he's just incapable of doing that, which is the really sad thing about him. Takes stubbornness to a whole other level.
Have we ever been nice?
I suppose not.
This is a contract job, so let's keep costs down. I'll call the Von Eltia and have her draw the guards away.
If you would.
What will we be destroying?
Who knows? That's hardly our concern.
Crates. Who cares? It won't come up again. Well, I mean, I think when a plan starts off with splitting the world in half using a magic sword, I mean, it's hard to go anywhere but convoluted from there. Back to field enemies that are slightly faster than your party in order to facilitate risky encounters. Well, it's interesting, Grail, because I was thinking about that, because we were talking about the convolutedness of Mythos' plan, and I think you're right that in a certain sense you could say that most JRPG villains all have convoluted plans, but I think that's also part of just, like, I see that as partly an artifact of how long and complex JRPG plots are, right? Because typically these plots take place over at least most of one era. There are tons of different characters and kingdoms and plots involved, and it's so much to keep in your head and manage all of just the facts of the matter about the plot, let alone their symbolic meaning as a player over the course of a JRPG. And I think one of the ways that can really come out is if you don't keep the entire like organism of the JRPG and all of its various plot points and twists and turns in your head at once, it's very easy to lose track of like all of the different pieces coming together in the villain's plan and what the villain's plan really represents and why all the different pieces are thematically resonant with one another. I was thinking about this with Duke too, and you could say this with so many characters in the Tales series, right? Like it takes so long to figure out like who he is, what his beef with the world is, what his emotional baggage is, how he's using, you know, certain technologies from which ancient civilizations and aligning with which particular creatures from the world in order to achieve what sort of end. And I think if you go through the work to like answer all those questions and put it all together into one picture, oftentimes it can be really interesting and illuminating and like give you a pretty robust understanding of the villain like we've been talking about. But I think if you're just, especially if you're a JRPG neophyte and you're just trying to wrap your head around one of these plots, it can feel like a really tall order to keep track of all of that. Oh, is Stone Lance the good stuff? All right, I'll have to add that to his loadout right now so that we can enjoy that. Stone Lance. Combos easily with Break Soul. I like that. Maybe I'll put it at the end then. Wind Lance. Yeah, why don't we try this, I guess? Why don't you try a new one? Fate? Yeah, sure. Let's try that. Oh, I love that. Good to know. Thank you. Yeah, it really is like, I think it's a skill and a muscle you have to build and keep trained like anything else, like keeping all of a JRPG in your head. Like I posted, I think actually I shared pictures of this journal that I kept during my Xenoblade Chronicles 3 work on the like the write-up reflection I did of it that's on Patreon actually, Grail, so you should have access to it. But it was like so important and so helpful to me after I had played the game multiple times and done my research on Wittgenstein to actually just take like a big oversized journal with blank pages and map out like, okay, here are all the different elements of the story. Here are the different like kingdoms and colonies and characters and concepts and plot lines, and this is how they all relate to each other. And then once you actually have it all out there, it becomes at least possible to draw connections between them without losing your mind or losing track of things. But it takes a not insignificant amount of effort, I think, more so than a lot of people appreciate. But it's efforts that are rewarded, at least in the JRPGs that are thoughtfully designed with care and with the end goal of sharing a certain message or theme or giving you a particular kind of experience. Which is why we do what we do, things such as Tales of Praxis. I guess while we're playing as Eizen, we might as well have him designated as the leader too. Had our expedition come back yet? I lost track. No, but soon.
This'll do. Try some.
That does sound like it would very quickly and exponentially get complex as you add in more factors and plot points and places to visit and things to do. Is this like a game you're actually working on developing, Grail, or like an idea you have that you're workshopping? Something you've been working on for a while, or a more recent thing? Tell me more. Top hat! Alright. Oh, and our expedition is back. Everything's coming up aces.
Take a look at this.
Oh, excellent. We're a bunch of losers.
Scout ship setting sail.
But the ship did level up at least. So there's that.
All right, the guards are gone. Let's move in.
Benwick and the crew did a fine job.
Red crates. These must be our targets. The seal of Midgand Cathedral?
Should we look inside?
There's no need. Burn them, Laphicet.
I definitely feel the procrastination bug. I get that. But props to you for digging in and trying to make it happen. I mean, that takes a lot of ambition and follow through. It's a good problem to have. Nice to be plagued by a bunch of inspiration.
That storm cost too much time. I must report to Lord Artorias as soon as possible.
But believe me, I have way too many article ideas and way too many documents too, so I get that it is a very real problem to have too many ideas to manage too.
It's you! Oh hey, the crybaby.
Eleanor Hume, Exorcist Praetor.
Oh, it's on!
You won't get away with this!
You really want to fight, don't you?
Now. We can like Eleanor and also like Alicia. It doesn't have to be exclusive.
Willing to fight without your Malachine?
No! You set the storehouse ablaze?
Almost definitely.
The people have worked so hard to withstand this time of crisis. How can you destroy what they have so painstakingly built?
Because I'm not human.
You'll pay for this, you demon!
Yeah, but counterpoint, Alicia got her own DLC, which we ended up enjoying and having a lot to say about with regard to her arc and how it weighed in on Zestiria.
More Malachim up her sleeves.
I will protect you, Madam Eleanor! Come and face me now,
Oh.
demon! He's adorable.
I can't believe I forgot about this fella.
I found you at last. That bad voice! Bien, you traitor! You'll never leave my clutches again! Not her! No!
The saga of Magilu and Bienfu.
Doing? Get out there and fight!
Hey, look! Is that smoke? It is! Fire!
The fire has spread enough. Let's get going.
You're coming with us.
Just scoop her up and put her somewhere else.
What happened? Oh, you're badly hurt.
I can wait. Gather the people and put out that fire.
Yes, madam.
Oh, because the other Malachim who are bound to exorcists don't have free will, right, Crow? Yeah, that is interesting.
Mostly nectar.
I believe. Vast stores of the medicine provided by High Priest Gideon to be distributed to doctors across the land.
Medicine given by the church. Why would anybody destroy it?
I got a feeling we'll find out.
Whew. Looks like we're in the clear.
Misfortune and anguish.
His will is too powerful to be shackled, right, Grail?
Well, at least now I know where to find him.
That's true. It's part of the fun. We never know where we'll end up.
You were looking for?
The very same. The Malak Bienfu. A creature of unfathomable wickedness and beguiling cuteness who broke the heart of this wretched maiden. Once I finally catch him, who knows what I'll be capable of.
This girl is something else, I'm telling you.
Not sure I get it.
Well, anyway.
Good. Pray that you never do. Let's go back and report our success.
Grail, while we're just hanging out, you and I, that JRPG idea of yours, it's really interesting to me, and it reminds me of something that I published quite a few years ago at this point, but especially if this is a project that you're working on, you might find it an interesting read. It was back when I was doing my work in the philosophy of games in undergrad. It was during a time when like virtual reality and the Oculus stuff was really coming to the forefront, and a lot of people were talking about how that was kind of going to be like the next evolution of video games and storytelling in a way that struck me as pretty confused and not quite working when you thought it through. So you might be interested in checking that out. I think, long story short, and the reason that I bring it up with you is there's like this interesting tension that I think not a lot of people are attuned to. The idea that in certain contexts, having like the freedom of choice that would make a world feel really believable in terms of letting you do whatever you want at any given time. And then the idea of a narrative, like a structured story that conveys a certain meaning and theme to you, can pull apart and oftentimes be at odds, and I would say in some cases even mutually exclusive from each other. And that's not to say that there can't be really interesting choice-based games and stories out there, but I think when you extend that to like the most extreme possible conclusion of it with like total virtual reality games, or what many people would refer to as total immersion in one sense or another, you kind of you challenge the ability to express a story in the way that we typically look at them in something like a JRPG. No, I could not imagine if that actually happened.
Here I come.
Let's go.
Not sure, it's the kind of thing one can imagine, to be honest. Oh, Laphicet is actually speaking up in battle now. That's nice.
Come on, really?
It's the little things that make the character development in these games. I wonder if that started when Velvet named him and I just didn't notice. That would make sense. When you say optional, do you mean like optional in the sense of like Undertale, where there's always a non-violent option to resolve things? Or even, I guess, Dishonored. That's also one of my favorite examples of a game that tells what I would say is a really cool story based on those kinds of principles, where you know, you have the option to deal with
really?
any enemy in lethal or non-lethal ways. With, of course, the grand joke being that it's typically 100 times worse whatever you do to take care of an enemy in the case that you don't kill them, as opposed to just executing them and having done with it. Oh yeah, that could be interesting too. I feel like as games are continuing to mature as like a narrative form, that's also becoming increasingly common, where you're getting more games in like the mainstream or mainstream adjacent that are not as centrally combat focused than games have historically been. And I don't see any reason that that's going to stop as a trend in the coming years. Because obviously combat is a great and kind of natural starting point for a game-based story, since there's built-in like victory and loss conditions to the idea of a battle. But I really think already, you know, a lot of the people who think about storytelling in games, whether they're in the industry or on the critical side, have moved beyond that as a basic element of what a game is. And I imagine it's only going to be a matter of time until that trickles down to more and more mainstream big budget releases.
What's the deal with you and that exorcist Eleanor?
She had tears in her eyes when we first saw her at Northgand. Velvet poked fun at her, calling her the crybaby exorcist.
Why would an exorcist cry?
Sacrificing the individual for the good of the many is part of Artorias' philosophy. She seemed troubled by that. She's naive.
That she can still carry on shows just how strong she is. It looks like they don't hand out the rank of Praetor to just anyone.
Hmm?
Just stay sharp around her. That's all.
By the way, is that Bienfu character that Magilou was after really a Moloch?
He may look strange, but yes, he's still a Moloch.
That means Magilou is an exorcist. Why does she call herself a witch then?
If she got locked up in that prison, she must have been kicked out of the Abbey.
Or she could be a fraud.
Yeah. Even if she wasn't an exorcist, she could still perform some tricks with a Moloch like that.
I will protect you, Madam Eleanor. Face me now, demon.
Right?
Pretty good impression.
Was that laughter?
I'm sorry.
Why apologize? Bienfu is funny, right?
Right.
Then if you want to laugh, laugh.
If you think that's funny, you should give it a try for yourself. Say,
Hi, I'm Laphicet.
All right. Hi, I'm Laphicet.
Knock it off.
Huh?
what's the problem?
Too far.
People are staring. Don't attract attention.
I'm sorry.
She's so uptight. Let's try it together later, Laphicet.
All right.
Get that gross joke voice out of my surrogate brother's mouth. Yeah, I'm with you, Grail. I mean, that's the archetypal case of what a lot of people talk about when they refer to ludonarrative dissonance in games, right? When the characters and themes are going in one direction, but the actual like combat and gameplay that you're expected to undertake kind of cuts in exactly the opposite direction of those themes. Though I do feel like the smartest games, like we've talked about on the stream before, do a really good job of subverting that, where if it's a world that has combat as a basic element of how you're navigating it, the characters do really wrestle with that and have a level of discomfort with it, or the meaning is brought directly into the narrative in one way or another that makes it really logical and consonant as a whole. Stuff like, you know, everything we talked about in terms of the nature of like purification versus killing in Zestiria, or I mean the obvious example of Luke wrestling with it in Tales of the Abyss. Some similar themes in Xenoblade, even Vesperia to a certain extent. And then cool stuff like I love Returnal, and that's an interesting case where, yeah, the whole game is pretty rigorously combat-based, but the game is also so deeply symbolic and metaphorical that it's much less about the combat as combat and more as the combat sort of serving as like a stand-in for like psychological processing and working through. So I think the more games also get like a language for making different levels of symbolic meaning out of their stories, the more they can kind of, if they do want to still include combat, have a more robust language for representing that combat as something that means different things in the context of their stories. You should talk about it, Grail. It's on your mind. I mean, you've got a captive audience, and I love talking and thinking about this stuff, obviously. Especially when it's something that's so personal and important to you that you've put so much thought into it.
It's
Don't
a
be shy.
history book titled The Rise and Fall of Midgand. About 800 years ago, our continent was conquered by a military force from another continent. Few records exist of the following 500 years. A period known as the Era of Darkness, or the Dark Period. Then 300 years ago, a great hero named Claudin Asgard reunited the kingdom, bringing an end to the Dark Period.
Claudin, huh? Where have I heard that name before?
All right, that's enough for today.
Thanks for teaching me, Arthur. Your techniques are so amazing. Where did you learn them?
They came from my own master, a man named Claudin. He developed them himself.
I'll give you an excuse any day of the week, Grail. You
so
know that.
Graceful. I wish I could move like that.
Skit jump scare. I love that. That's
Taught you
exactly
the
what it
forms,
is.
But for some reason, your execution deviates from the ideal.
Well, my body just kind of moves on its own.
You're a handful, Velvet. But I will say you do resemble Claudin some. He was a strange person himself. He always wore this peculiar cape, for instance.
Cape, you say?
Deep down, Claudin was strong like fire, vivacious like water, steadfast like earth, and free like wind. I can't help but admire him to this day.
Mastery of the elements, a special cape.
Sadly, that's impossible.
Claudin's sounding kind of familiar.
Is he dead?
Yes, he is. He died to protect me. That's why
No way. The events recounted in this book happened 300 years ago. It can't be the same Claudin.
The counterpoint, what if it is the same Claudin?
I'm fine. Don't mind me.
King Claudin was quite strong, wasn't he?
He was more than just that. He's the most well-loved and trusted king in our history. Or so the book claims.
To this day, all of Midgand's rulers claim to be direct descendants of King Claudin Asgard. Knowing that, there might be meaning behind them bestowing Artorias with the grandiose title of Shepherd. I could see it as an attempt to recreate the same glory enjoyed by the Hero King who ended the Dark Period.
If that's true, it's a childish ploy. The world's not so easily changed.
I wouldn't be so sure. What matters is that the title inspires hope in the people, who in turn give him their support. Then, as their shepherd, he can guide his flock in any direction he pleases.
If Artorias knowingly accepted that title, we can be sure he's fully committed to his cause.
Oh, he's certainly committed. I've seen just how far he's willing to go.
Interesting. Really, really cool background context. I hope we learn more about the history of the world in this one. But so that then clearly has me thinking that, picking up on our earlier conversation, we are not witnessing then the creation of the first shepherd. It sounds much more like, if anything, Claudin may have been the first shepherd with the mastery of elements and the standing amongst seraphim, or I guess in this context, Malachim, to be able to pull humanity out of the Dark Ages in a similar way to how Soray pulled humanity out of the Age of Chaos in Tales of Zestiria. All right, fair enough. Well, we're rounding the 8 o'clock time anyways, so I will pull out a save. Good timing, all things considered. We got through a lot of adventures in the capital. We got to bear witness to the new Artorias and begin on our scheme to hopefully find out what he's planning and exact Velvet's revenge, or learn something important in the process, and who knows, take things in a different direction after that. Grail, my friend, a pleasure as always. I hope you game well and have a great weekend. Pink Moon Neko, it was so nice to see you back as well, my friend. Hope to see you on Monday too. Really enjoying this. There are so many other registers of its meaning that are opening up based on the context of having just played Tales of Zestiria and also having a lot of other Tales games in the ether. And I have no doubt that we're going to find much more of that this coming week on Monday and in the weeks to come. So 7 p.m. Eastern, we'll be back here on Monday, hopefully with some more incoming updates on articles and lectures and all sorts of other ancillary content as well. Until then, my dear friends, I'm Aaron Suduko. This has been Tales of Praxis. Thankfully, finally with some better quality audio, so we'll just keep moving on up one day at a time from here. Until Monday, cheers.